Okay, let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so very thankful, Lord, for this day, for the opportunity once again to study your word, to look at Bible prophecy and the chronology that helps us understand it and confirm it. And we pray that you can guide in what we study here today. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And this is a continuation of the study from last Sunday and also the study from the Friday night before. And last Sunday, we looked at the Molad calculator and what the Molad was. And this is, for the simplest way to understand it, is it's the period of time that the Jews used to measure how long a month is, the average month. And they used a number. That number is 765432 plus 1. So it's 765432 or 433 actually at the end. And that's the number of parts of a day that the length of the month is. Now, for people to understand this, I'm just going to actually switch to my calculator. I don't usually share my calculator on the screen, but if you look here, I'm just going to delete this here. I want to just show you some of these calculations. Oops, that's not what I wanted done. Let's go like that. There. Kind of see colors behind there. I'm going to try to get rid of that. There we go. And let's go. Okay, so with the calculator, if I keep clicking on this, I can't do that. I got to click on the calculator on the other screen. That's why. Now, if I look at this many days, or parts of a day. Let's do it as parts of a day first. So I got to go back. That's how long a month is. But each one of these parts is 3 1/3 seconds. So this is called a helic or chelic, helic. And so it'd be 765,433 helikim. So that's how long a month is. And I'm not going to go through all the explanation of how they came to figure this out. But what we would do to figure out how many days this would be is we would have to divide this number by 25920, because that's how many parts there are in a day, how many helics are in a day. When I do that, I will get that it's 29.530941358, etc. days. That's how long a month is. Now that's actually so accurate that at the time, this is exactly how long the month was in about 300 to 500 BC. This is at the time in which they did this calculation. So it's an extremely accurate representation of the length of the month. Now, just to show people how these things work. So this is a month in a decimal form, but we would want to know how many days and how many hours. So you can see, since it's 5.3, that it's more than 12 hours. So a month is 29 days and 12 hours. So what I do is I simply subtract 29. I have to hit equal. I can't just keep doing the calculation. And this would be the fraction. Now, if I multiply this by 2592, this is the fraction, or 25920. I have to go backwards. 25. What did I multiply it by? I forgot that. There we go. I have to multiply it by 25920. And this is the top part of the fraction. So that means that a month is 29 days and 13,753 parts over 25,920 parts. So you can see it's more than halfway. Now, half of 25,920 is 12,960. So if I subtract that, those are the number of parts over 12 hours. So it's 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 parts. That's how long a month is. But we could have put this into our system. So what we would do is we would subtract the 29 again. And then we would multiply this by 24. This will give us the number of hours, 12 hours. And then I subtract the 12 hours. And I would multiply it by 60 to get how many minutes. And you can see it's 44 minutes. And then I subtract 44 and I multiply it by 60 to get how many seconds. And you can see that according to the Jewish calendar, how they calculate the month, it's 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 33 1/3 seconds. Now, 33 1/3 seconds, it's very accurate. You can see how that works. Now, those are, remember that a part is 3 1/3 seconds, a helic. So that's actually just one helic. Does that make sense to people? That basically, if I go like this, 793 is the number of parts. That would be the minutes and seconds. So if I multiply this by, anyway, I'd have to multiply it by 25920. Never mind. I'm not going to do that. That's going to be confusing. So let's just leave that calculation alone. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that this is the length of the month based on the Jewish calendar, right? So it's this month, and we usually just use this fraction here. They only go to 6 decimal points. So that's how long a Jewish month is. It's slightly longer than the month is now. The month now is 29.530587. So it's a little bit shorter than it was before. Not very much, just slightly. Now, so I'm going to get back to this other screen. Now, the reason why we wanted to look at this month had to do with this prophecy here of the 391 years, the prophecy of Josiah Litch. Now, some of you remember this because we looked at this a lot before July 18th, and we have looked at it since, but not as in much detail as we had previously. Now, what we had come to understand was that this 391 years is a natural cycle. That is, the solar year and the lunar year line up every 391 years. What you get is 403 lunar years, and we're using the Islamic calendar. And by the way, the Islamic calendar uses a shorter month than the ancient Hebrew calendar, because the Islamic calendar is a modern calendar. So their month is 29.530587 days in length, not 29.530594. So instead of 594 like the ancient Hebrew calendar is, it's 587 days in length, so it's slightly shorter. Now the Islamic calendar lines up. Well, what happens is I'll show you here. So we'll go to this Molad interval calculator. Now, what I can do with this calculator here is I can divide the day into 403 parts. When I do that, it makes a month 11,900 parts. Now it says 11,901. It's actually, and I need to change this. If I was using the Islamic calendar, I'd change this to 8/7, though it's not really going to affect our calculation that much. But 11,901, it's really 11,900.8333 parts. Now, so this period of time is how long a month would be if we divided the day into 403 parts. Now, we don't do that, but if you did, that's how you would represent how long a day is, or a month is. You would say it's 11,901 of those parts. But what this does give us a representation of that's quite interesting. We also know, if that's the case, that 11,900 days is going to be 43 or 403 months. So that many months is 33.58 lunar years, or 32.53 solar years. So what I'm going to do is just go back to the other screen, or the other chart. And so what we have here is these periods here. What I did is I took this 391 years and I had divided it into 12 periods of 11,900 days, because 11,900 days is 32.253 years, or pardon me, is 32.583 years on the like solar years, but it's 33.583 lunar years. Now, another way of looking at this is I'm going to go to this calculator again. So if I look at 403 years, I could divide this into months. So I'm going to divide it, 403 years times 12 months. So it's going to be, what's going on here? I have this other, I didn't delete everything. Okay, there we go. 403 years times 12 months is 48,036 months. Now, each of those months are going to be 29.530587 days in length on average. So if I multiply this by 29.530587, I'll get this number, 142,809, and it has a decimal at the end. So that decimal is slightly, it's slightly less than 142,810 days. Now, if I divide this then by 12, you'll see I get this 11,900, 82656. So that 8333 is really, to be more accurate, it would be 11,900.8333 days. That period of time, if I divide it by a solar year, 365.242189, you'll see that it ends up being, I multiplied it, divide 365.242189. I have to do that again. You'll see that I get 32.583 years. Now, our months are longer than Islamic months. That is, an Islamic month is 29 and a half roughly, and ours are 30 and a half roughly. So we're going to have, in the time that we have 391 months, they have 403 months. So it's also 403 years, that they have 403 Islamic years, and we end up with 391 years. So just to go back here, you can see this period of 391 years is 142,810 days. It's actually more closer to 142,809 days and 20 hours, but we're just gonna leave it at that for now. And you can see each one of these groups is 11,900. Each one of those groups is on our calendar 32.53 years. But on an Islamic calendar, it'd be 33.583 years. That is, they would have moved in 11,983.833 days. They will have gone one more year. And that's for the simple fact that their month is shorter. But also, it happens that the biblical year and the solar year align in 31 years. So the biblical year starts here on the 26th day of the fourth month in July 27th, 1449, and July 27th, 1840. These are both Gregorian dates. The 26th day of the fourth month also lines up with July 27th. So that only happens every 391 years. So if you're going to line up the biblical year with the solar year, it's going to be every 391 years. Now I shouldn't really say that because you do have a metonic cycle, but it's not as accurate as this. So one of the most accurate cycles is to take the biblical year and align it with the solar year every 391 years. Now, this cycle was never used in ancient times, but it is in Bible prophecy. That's a period of a month, a day, and a year in prophetic time. If we put it into our solar years, 391 years, it lines up the biblical calendar to the date. So the biblical year and the date align. But we also are lining up the Islamic calendar, but it's a period of 403 years. That is, this period of 1,100 days, 11,900 days, if we put it into months, would be 32 years, 7 months. And if we put it on the Islamic calendar, it'd be 33 years and 7 months. So in order to get the Islamic calendar to line up so that it's whole years, you need to go 391 years. So this cycle here is this interesting cycle where we're dividing the whole period into these periods of 12. Now, at the time, this is kind of logical. It's just a way of analyzing these periods of time. But the fact that the Islamic year takes 11,900 days to change 1 year in relationship to the solar year. What's the significance of that number, 11,900?
Well, it can represent.
What's that?
It can represent September the 11th in the European.
Right, so it can represent September 11th, which you would call it 11/9. It can also November 9th as well.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so these were things that we noticed before. Now, the other thing that I want to look at is this back tune. Now, the back tune comes from the Mayan calendar. It's a period of 144,000 days. So many people will remember this, that what I did is I looked at this period of 144,000 days, and I saw that it was a little bit longer than 142,810 days. And so I just said, how many days longer is it? And it happened to be 1,109 days longer than 391 years. So it ends up being 1/10 of 1/12 of that entire period. And that to me just seemed so highly unlikely that you would have that same number represented again, but this time as a 10th. And what's the significance of the 10th?
Remnant.
It's a symbol of the remnant. So we understand the 10th, which is a tithe as well, that it shows up in our prophetic lines. And so this seemed extremely significant. Now I'm going through this, I kind of just jumped into this a little bit to look at things to try to remind us about this. But one of the things that we see is that these structures, which I only saw in the Islamic calendar, or at least analyzed it there, relate to the prophetic mirror, the 2,604 years. And so we're going to look at that. So there's lots of other things in this chart, that I would love to go through. Now, Stephen probably remembers, but when we started to look at this in detail, this period of time, I don't even remember how we did it, but what we did is we zoomed in and it actually became accurate down to the minute. Was that correct, Stephen?
Yeah, I think it was the 20 hours.
Yeah.
Was like roughly a rough period, but it
Yeah.
worked out to be, I think, 1190 minutes or something.
Yeah, it was 1190 minutes, I think is what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it ended up being that we got now not just down to 1100, and 11,900 days down to 1190 days. But when we broke down it into smaller sections and zoomed in, it was 1190 minutes, that period of 20 hours. Because it's 20 hours would be normally how many minutes?
Yeah, I think it's about 1200.
Yeah, so 1200. But it was just slightly less than that. So when we worked it down to this exactitude, I was pretty shocked by it. But probably shouldn't have been. But this was just before July 18th. So we had all these types of evidences that were coming in just from every direction. And so we did some presentations on that. But where I want to go to now has to do with what we were studying on the Friday before. And that was looking at the story of Abraham of the 215 years. So the 215 years, if I can find it here, I got so many slides here. So I go. So this is where we were as far as this is this whole structure, but you can't see all of it at once. This 215 years is the time from when Abram left Haran at the age of 75 and to the time when Jacob entered Egypt. So this was part of this prophetic mirror of 430 years. It's not all drawn out here. But this 215 years, what's the significance of it?
Well, it's half the 430.
Okay, so it's half the 430.
It's also the dividing time from when the family went into Egypt and until they came out of Egypt.
Right, so it's the time, the 215 years from the time that of the 4 generations, right? So going from dealing with Levi all the way to Aaron, right? Because he's going to be the 4th generation. And so it's that period of time of 215 years. Now, and I'm trying to remember exactly what we were doing. There was, we had made some calculations. Now, one calculation that we had that was interesting. So I'm going to go back and see if I can remember this going back to the calculator. So 215 times, what would we multiply it by?
$360 maybe.
Well, if you multiply it by 360, you're going to get this number 77400. So this is the number of prophetic days that 215 years is. Okay. Now, I could also multiply 215 and find the actual number of days. So roughly, this isn't 100% accurate, but it's close. 78,527 days. Now, if I took 217 years and I multiplied it by 360, what do I get?
It's like the mixed up, July 18.
Okay, it's July 18, 2020, but in a different order, right? So it's a different iteration of those 5 digits. Correct?
Agreed.
Yeah, and so we could look at dates. I mean, I actually went through all the different iterations and looked at all these different spans of time and so forth. And these different iterations show up in our lines. You can go to my birthday and look at all the different iterations of these 5 numbers, and you're going to come up to significant dates. You can do the same thing with Donald Trump, and you can do the same thing with Abraham Lincoln. So I've never really showed anybody all of those things that I did because it's just way too complicated. It takes a lot of time to show it. But we know that we can look at an iteration of these numbers and that it has significance. Now, 217 is significant. 217 years is significant for what reason?
Several. It's the Battle of Raphia in 217 BC.
217 BC, yeah.
And we can represent the 21st of July, which is midnight in 1844.
Yeah. What's another one?
The flood was on the 17th day of the 2nd month.
Okay, the flood. Yeah, so the 17th day of the 2nd month of Noah's 600th year.
In Genesis 2:17, there's a time prophecy also.
Genesis 2:17, there's a time prophecy.
And it's half of the. You have the 31, the 70 weeks.
Right. So if I take 217 and I divide by 31, I'll get 7. So that is, if you take the 62 weeks and you divide it, because it's 343 years, right? Or 433 years, pardon me. Right? So 62 times 7 is 434 years. That's the time from the end of the 7 weeks to the beginning of the final week. And that can be divided into 2 by 31. So if I go divide by 30.
You just divide it in 2.
Yeah, just divide it into 2, right? So yeah, divide it by 2. And then that gives me the 217. And so it gives us this number. So this number 217 becomes significant. But it's also significant because when you take the prophetic mirror of 2,604 years and you divide it by 12, you also get 217. So this prophetic mirror, that's such a big part of this movement, also gives us this number, So that means I can take this 2,604 years and divide it in this way, just as we could with the 391 years. And so if I do that, 217 years, how many months are there in 217 years? Gregorian months on our calendar.
Well, you already said 2604.
Right. So you're right. You're just doing the reverse. So you take 2,604 years divided by 12, you get 217 years. But that means also that in 217 years, since there's 12 months in a year, there's going to be 2,604 months on our calendar. So you see the logic of that. So these are just analytical tools that we can use, but they give us information. So it's kind of interesting that we didn't really see this back when I was studying the prophetic mirror. I did see it in the 70 weeks when I took the 62 weeks, that it was 2 periods of 217 years. Destruction of Jerusalem on
The 217th day, or from the beginning of the year, is August 6th. Yeah.
Okay, so August 6th is the 217th day of the year. Okay, thanks for that. So there's all these significances of the 217. Now, we were studying on the Friday, we were studying dealing with the sanctuary, but then I came across this, which I had partly seen in the past, but I hadn't completely seen. Now, in order to sort of analyze this further, we can look at what this 217 represents in as far as prophetically, why this number shows up. So the significance of the prophetic year, what's the real significance, not of the prophetic year, of a prophetic mirror? What's the significance of the prophetic mirror? What is it trying to show us?
Well, it connects ancient Israel to spiritual Israel.
Okay, connects ancient Israel to spiritual Israel. Now, when we look at the prophetic mirror, we know that it's connected to the prophetic mirror from the story of Joseph. Right, so this prophetic mirror here, which I don't quite have drawn in, but the whole prophetic mirror is not drawn in here. But we also did connect this part in the story of Joseph, which we don't have time to do now. But we had 1,764 years, which was 7 times 252. This goes from 34 AD to 1798. And this is the 1,260 years plus the 504 years. So this is the persecution of Christians by pagan Rome, and this is the persecution of Christians by papal Rome. These 2 different periods. That ends up being 7 times 252, or 14 times 126, depends how you want to divide it. And if we count backwards from 34 AD, we come to the end of the prophetic mirror for Joseph in 731 BC with the death of Jacob. And in working through some of this history, trying to understand, we know Jewish tradition puts 2 periods of 7 years, 7 years to possess the land and 7 years to have rest from their enemies. So that gives a period of 252 years. But even then, without that, we have 723 and from 723 BC back to the death of Jacob is 4 times 252, or 108 years, or 1008 years, I mean. And then from 723 to 34 AD is 3 times 252. So what we can do is we can connect back all of this about the promised land. And in 723, why does the captivity, the 2520 for northern Israel begin with the captivity of Hoshea? What's the issue? Why do we have a 2520 scattering?
Well, it's part of a judgment for idolatry.
Okay, so it's about the land, right? For not keeping the land, having the land rest.
Correct.
And so we can see that this is all connected to the land to a large degree, though it's also connected to the people, because the people and land are connected. So there's lots of different lines of prophecies. They're all kind of intertwined with each other. But we can see that one of the primary things is this promised land, and the promised land is tied all the way back. And in 1798, what's the promised land?
United States.
It's the United States. So we can see that we can connect the United States back to this history in the story of Joseph. Now, this study, it's still pretty hard to explain because it's not an organized study, but I'm trying to at least to see these connections, the usefulness of this. Now, this period of time, 1764 years, is, it's not something that we normally think about. So it's 1764 times 2 is 35,028 years, or 3,528 years, pardon me. So 3,528 years. Now, I'm going to go back to this Molad calculator. And I haven't worked out all of these things yet. But if I wanted to go to that many years, I would have to go to this is way too many. Okay, that's too many. Where would I go here? So how many years did I need? 3,528. So I'd have to cut this in about half. So that would be about so you see what I'm doing here, I'm just guessing. I haven't tried this out yet. That's pretty interesting. So 3,528 solar years is what I need. So it's going to be less than that. Okay, so it's going to be more than this. It's going to be more than that. So what am I doing?
What is it you're trying to find? What the actual?
I just want to know how many, I want to look at the number of months. So I want to look at these numbers. Now, 3,528. I just want to see what it does. So I haven't worked this out. So 3,528. So
Hey, I had sent you a calculator where you can just put in the.
yeah, I saw
Yeah.
that, but I didn't understand it. Okay, so parts, what I want to find is the number of months. So now I'd have to add these months together, right? Okay, let's do it this way. If I'm going to do this times, so I'm going to switch over to my calculator. Times 30. So this would be a prophetic month. That's how many days would be in, well, that would be, and then times 12. So this would be 1,270,080 days. There was something I'd seen before, and I can't remember what it was. I should have written it down. I was doing lots of calculations. So I want to go back to this 217 years. So the 217 years times 360 is this many. Now, if we divide it by 12, okay, we get 6,510. So that's the number of prophetic days. So I'm trying to remember what the number was I was doing, because it worked nicely in the calculator, but I don't remember what it is now. So I should have worked this out before. So it's not that number. So let's go back here. 3,528. So I'm going to look at this number of years and divide it by 217. Where is this number? Okay, that's what I could do. Okay, what's the significance of this number, 1764? That's the number of years. That's 7 times 252.
Thinking.
Okay, let's look at some other number. Here's a number. What number is this? 120 times 49. Anybody know what that is? What I did? Why did I choose 120 and multiply it by 49? And what's this number?
Okay, you've connected that to 6,000 years of sin.
Okay, so the way that I looked at this number is I said that if after 7 years, so the 8th year after creation, if that's when man sinned, it would be 5,880 years to 1844. And that's taking this 120 times 49 as a Jubilee cycle. Now, this number, if I divided it by, oops. What did I have to do here? Hang on. Oh, right. I have to. So I'm going to go back here. 5,880 times 3. So what number is this? So I took that number and I multiplied it by 3. So what does that mean?
Well, it's 10 times the period from 34 AD to 1798.
Okay, so yeah, so what I'm doing is, well, another way we could look at it is that 5880, so this number here, if I multiply it by 0.3, gives me this number. That's another way of looking at it. So what's the relationship then between 1764 and 5880? What's that relationship?
1/3.
Okay, well, a third would be 0.33333333. But it's close, right? That is, if I took this number and I multiplied it by 3, I get this number. Now, what's this number?
It's the 25920, almost like mixed up.
Right. It's an iteration of that without a 0 in it. It's 2592, but reversed. Instead of 25, it's 52. Right. But it's just mixed up. Make sense? So what are we seeing here in these relationships? Because we have this number 1764. This number is simply 7 times 252. And it's related to this period of time, the 5,880 years. So, oops. So 5,880 divided by 3 gives us this number. What's this number? I know it's not easy looking at all these numbers if you're not a number person.
Abraham coming out of Babylon.
That'd be 1963. So it's 28 times 70 is this number. So these numbers are all interrelated. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make here, is that we have all these numbers that are interrelated in scripture, in these prophetic periods, but we don't see it at first. Now, what does the Molad, what does the length of the month, what did it help us understand? That we had this period of what, 25,920 years. And that's related to the period of time of 25,920 months. That is 765,432 plus 1 days. But it's also the parts of a day. So what did this tell us? Maybe I didn't explain it well last time. But if the great year is 25,920 years, and we divide that by 12, so we have 12 years for each one, or 12 for each one of these months, or whatever you want to call it. It ends up being 2,160 solar years. And that's going to be 1/12 of a circle, so 30 degrees. And what else is it?
6 times 6 times 60.
Okay, so 6 times 6 times 60. Now, the other thing that we look at is we were looking at the number 215 and 216 or 217. So what's the number 216? What's its relationship? Why do we have these three different numbers, 215, 216, and 217? How are they related to each other?
Other than sequentially, they each have something to do with different biblical prophecies.
Okay, so they have something to do with different biblical prophecies. Now, remember, we divided the prophetic mirror, which was 2604. We divided it into 12 and we got 217. And now we take 25920 and we divide it into 12 and we get 2160. So can we say that these are another way, by dividing things by 12, we show up with these numbers? That there's some significance in this.
There would have to be.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, if we go to the story of Acts, and I want to go there because we've looked at this before, but I kind of want to remind people. So in Acts 27, this is the story of Paul sailing from Rome, or sailing to Rome from Jerusalem, right? So it's his journey. And we know that there's this storm, and we've studied this in detail, but the main point was this sounding in Acts 27:28. And it's when the 14th night was come that we were driven up and down Adria. About midnight, the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country. So what's the significance of 14 and what's the significance of midnight?
Well, 14 is 2 times 7.
Right, so it's 2 times 7, and that brings us back to the story of Joseph, doesn't it? And Jacob as well.
Yes.
2 periods of 7 years. Now we have 2 periods of 7 days, 14 days. And then we have midnight. So that midnight is that other symbol that is a symbol of a chiasm, right? Millerite history, midnight, July 21st, that's midnight, and it's exactly centered between the first day of the first month and the 10th day of the 7th month, which is the 187th day of the year. So we have this symbol. And then we have these measurement, 20 fathoms. A fathom is 72 inches. And then they're going to sound again, it's going to be 15,000 fathoms. So 20 fathoms is how many inches?
1080.
Yeah, so it's 1080, and 1080 is what?
It's an hour.
It's an hour. It's half of 2160, correct?
Right.
Right. So that number we have of 216, 20 fathoms in inches is half of that number. And then the other number that we have, 15 fathoms, is the number 1440 inches. And we know if we, is that right?
Yeah.
Is it the other way around?
Oh yeah. I guess that's right. The 20, it would be
20.
1440.
Yeah, the 20 is
Okay.
1440. And then you would add it to the 1080. So we got it backwards. And that ends up being what number if we add them together? 1440 plus
2520.
So it ends up being 2520. So this becomes extremely significant. We have this number 2520. We also have in this story the number 273, the number 276. We have, again, the 214s. We have the symbol of midnight. So we have all of these symbols that are related to this message. So we could tell that this chapter is about this movement. Now, when we go to the idea of 217 and 216, we can see that they relate to these other numbers. So I've got to switch here. So I'm going to go back here. So if I take 215, now this is 12 times 215. What number do I get? You can see it there. But how would you look at this number? What is this number? I mean, we know what it is.
It's 1290 doubled.
Okay, 1290, right. So you can see that this relates to a prophecy we already understand, correct? So we divide this by 2 and we get the 1290, the 1290 days, which is 1290 years. So is there a relationship then between the 215 and the 1290? Because we just had the story of Joseph. We connected it with this mirror of 1764. And now we could look at this and connect it in that way. Can we connect it in this way? Because what's the significance of the 1290?
Isn't that 6 times 215?
Yes, it'd be 6 times 215. Mhm.
So in other words, we have the number of man multiplied by the prophetic time of the family of Jacob going into Egypt and coming out of Egypt.
Mhm. Yeah. Now we could also, instead of looking at 215, we could look at 430.
Right.
And that'd just be 430 times 3.
Right.
If you wanted to look at it. So there's this connection of this prophetic mirror in the past to these prophetic mirrors and structures in Millerite history. And the thing that gives us this key, for me personally, was studying the Molad interval. I started to recognize that what I'd seen in the story related to the prophecy of Josiah Litch in dividing it by 12. And then when we did the study on that, looked at the 215 and then the 217, I could see now that there is this connection. Now, that's because we can take this whole cycle of 25,920 years and divide it into 12. And we get this other number, 216, 2160, but still related to that. So these structures then, these prophecies that we have been studying this movement are connected to these cycles that God has created with the sun and the moon and the stars. Now, somebody asked me a question about why are we using 25,920 years when the world's only 6,000 years old? And the simple answer to that question would be why? Why are we doing that? Are we going back 25,920 years?
No.
No, we're just saying that at the time that they created this calendar, they could notice that an entire procession of the equinoxes would occur in 25,920 years, based upon their observation that it moved 1 degree every 72 years. So that is, the equinox precessed, moved backwards in relation to the ecliptic, 1 degree every 72 years. And they could observe this. And then just with that simple calculation, 72 times the 360 degrees, whoops, would give us this period of 25,920 years. Now, the interesting thing to me is part of what I was looking at is did the Jews understand how long a year was? In my paper, I'd ask that question. And now, of course, they would have known an approximation by counting how many days it took from equinox to equinox. And they would recognize that it's 365 and a quarter. But that's not 100% accurate. And the question is, how accurate did they perceive it to be? And my point is, if they understood that there was 25,920 years in this great cycle, that they would have known actually how long a year was. And why would they know that? Why does knowing the great cycle tell them how long a solar year is? How many days it is? This took me a while to kind of figure out. Simply, we would go back and look at how long a period of 25,920 months was, right?
Okay,
And also that they had divided the day into 25,920 parts. But they also had understood the length of a solar year, or a lunar year. So they knew that 12 months, which would be 2,160 lunar years, they knew that it would be how many days? So 25,920 is months, right? And if I divide it by 7,654,33, whoops, I'm doing it backwards. I always do this backwards. So this many months, I'd have to multiply it by 29.530594. That's how long they knew the month was. And they knew that that was this many days. It's almost exactly 765,432 days. But they knew this was also 12 lunar years. Not 12. 2,000. So they could do this. They could divide this by 2160, 2,160 lunar years. And this gives them a precise measurement of the lunar year. Now, how does that help them understand the length of the solar year? Because they know that the lunar year is 2,160. 60 lunar years is 765,432 plus 1 days. But they know that the great cycle is not based on lunar years, it's based on solar years. So how does this help them? How do they relate the length of the year to the length of the month? The question is, can they find this conversion, 1.0307, to convert a lunar year into a solar year? Do they have any tools to do that based upon all these cycles?
outside of the Metonic cycle, I don't know.
Okay, and even the Metonic cycle, because the Metonic cycle, I mean, they knew is 6,940 days. But they knew that wasn't accurate. They knew it was off slightly. So now they could calculate it based upon 235 months times, what they would do is they would multiply the parts times 76543 2 plus, whoops, 1. I did that backwards. I did that divided. So we go 235 months times, I guess what we would do is we just go times, we'll do it this way. I was going to do it in parts, but then it makes the math messy. So they know the month is this long, right? And so they can multiply it and they're going to get this number, correct? For the Metonic cycle,
Right.
because they know how long the month is. But if they know how long the month is, don't they know how long the year is? Because this is 19 years. Now, it's not going to be 100% accurate. You know, it's a little bit off, but it's very accurate, really. So we know that this is 19 years. And they're going to get a year something like this. Right? But the question is, how did they figure out how long the month was? Exactly. Didn't it have to do with the measurement of the year? Is the year involved? Or is it they just counting months? I know this is not an easy puzzle. Right? It's not something that's easy to understand. I still think that the only way that they really could look at it is the longer the cycle they looked at, the more accurately they could determine how long the year was. Correct? Any cycle, the longer it is, as long as you know that cycle is correct, it's going to give you a larger decimal, like a more precise decimal, right?
Right.
So how does the 25,920 years help them? Because if we divide it by 12, we get this many years. But remember, their cycle, this is more than, because they had 2,095 years and 8 months for their cycle of 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 days, right? So this is how many years longer than the cycle that they had.
Uh, 65.
Okay, so it's going to be 64 and 4 months, right? 64 years and 4 months. Okay. Now, but they can they figure out a conversion rate? Knowing that there is a period of 2,160 years that is so many days, can they figure out a conversion rate using this number? Because this is solar years. Can they compare the solar years with the lunar years? Is some tool been provided that they can do that? Because they have the Metonic cycle, but does this give them a bigger cycle of years?
I would think yes.
Okay, so it gives them a bigger cycle. So the question is, can they figure this out? Because they would have to know how many months there are in 2,160 years. All they would do is look at the difference, right? So the difference is 64 years and 8 months or 4 months. So does that help them?
It should give them another piece.
Okay. And they could break that down into fractions, just kind of like we did. The way that I look at this, and I haven't, when we look at this number, so let's go back to what we were looking at the beginning. we were looking at this chart of Josiah Litch's prophecy. So we'll go back and look at this. And the thing was, we had 144,000 days and 142,810 days. So we have these two different periods of time. And to me, this is kind of analogous to what we see happening here. We have a period of longer days and a period of shorter days. But there's a relationship between this. Now, is there any relationship between 64 years? So I'm just gonna 64. Gives us 23,375 and a half days plus we need 8 months. So 8 months times 29.5
No,
is
4 months. 4 months.
what's that?
No, 4 months.
No, it's 8 months. The 4 months is in the other direction, isn't it?
Right. Okay.
Right. So it's yeah, because what, okay, yeah, maybe, yeah, I have to think here for a second. Yeah, it's 4 months, you're right. So I'd ask 4 months, and 4 months is how many days? $128. Okay, so the number here, I'm going to switch. You're not looking at my calculator, so. Okay, so this is the number of days. Whoops, I didn't share that properly. Roughly. So this is the number of days that is the difference between 2,160 solar years and 2,160 lunar years. So what is this number? So what are we seeing here with this number? And anybody notice what we're seeing? It's pretty close to the number. It's only 2426 off from 25920. Correct?
Right.
So what if I said that I had 76543 days plus, and I add 25920, and I get this many days. And now I'm going to multiply this by 12. Why did I multiply it by 12?
Number of months.
Okay.
Is this the number of days in the great year?
So the number of days in the great year.
Okay.
So this ends up being slightly more, but I haven't done accurate math here. I've done some kind of rough math, and you're going to get off as you get to such big numbers. But notice it's pretty close to 26,000 years. Now, so we could break this down, and I know it's kind of hard to, I don't have any visual things other than doing these calculations. But could they then figure out an approximation? If they knew how long the months were, could they then approximate how long the great cycle was? And could they then divide that to figure out the length of the year?
That would be possible.
Right. So they could get a more accurate. Now, so I need to work this out a little more clearly than what I've done here, but you can see that they would have had an approximation, and this approximation is a lot closer than it looks because we're dealing with such long periods of time. Right. So as you start to get into these long periods of time, I still think that they would have, instead of working that way, they would have worked backwards. So if they know this period of time is the great cycle, they would need to know how many days have gone by in 72 years. And what's 72 years? What's the significance there?
Well, it's half of 144.
Okay, so it's half of 144. Now it's 26,297 days. So it's obviously not 25,920, but it's not a lot more. It's 320 or something like that more. So in 72 days, you're saying that they could take 2 degrees would be 144 years. Okay. The question that I have, could they figure out how many degrees based on the Metonic cycle, how many degrees would make up so many years of the Metonic cycle? So they could relate this to the Metonic cycle, which they have to, because the Metonic cycle is something that they can observe in a short period of time. So all they would do is they would take their smaller cycles and they would keep checking them with these larger cycles. But the key is that they chose this division of the day. Without choosing this division of the day, they wouldn't have been able to figure out an accurate representation of the month in fractions. But they also would only have chosen this division of the day because it's 12 times. So this number here, if we divide it by 12, and then divide it by 60, then divide it by 6, we end up with 6. And so this is a representation of 666, which they would have understood. Does that make sense? That the reason they made these calculations was because they believed that the universe was ordered and that this precession of the equinoxes was created by God. Now, are they correct? Is this just math that happens? Because the question that I'm asking, can we say that the prophetic periods in the Bible are related to the math from astronomy? I mean, that's the question, I guess, that I'm asking. Can we say that?
Yeah, well, you can see that with 381 years.
Yeah, so we could see it with the 391 years. But the question is, can we look at all of the prophetic periods? Can we relate them to the structure of the sun and the moon and the stars? which would be the planets. And the question is, what would that mean? Because we looked at that when we looked at the book of Ezekiel. So is this out there, or is this solid?
I can't really say it's out there.
Well, I have a hard time saying it's out there, but people will have a hard time with this because they're going to look at it again as we're using Babylonian numbers, right?
Right.
But just like when we were using the Mayan calendar, why are you using a pagan calendar? But we understand that God created the sky and he gave it to be for signs, for seasons, for days and years. And yet it has been perverted. But in Bible prophecy, God seems to recognize these periods of time, that you have something astronomical happening here in this prophecy regarding Islam that can relate to the lunar calendar, but also to the cycle of the moon, because the lunar calendar is based on the cycle of the moon. And then we look at Acts 27, we can see that the symbols there relate to the numbers that we see in the great procession, right? So the great year, the procession of the equinoxes. And when God set things up at the beginning, the question is, did he set up this clock that we now see, or was that clock destroyed by the flood? Most people believe that what we see after the flood is an imperfect clock, because they think a perfect clock is 360 years and 30 days. And I've showed that mathematically, that's actually not possible. That is, you can't have a year of 360 days and a month of 30 days, even though it seems logical. When you try to work that out, it doesn't work. That is, you would have to change the orbit of the Earth, not just in a minor way, but in a drastic way. And the flood could have changed the revolution of the Earth. That's possible, but it could not have changed the orbit of the Earth in that way. Plus, when you actually look at what's perfect, you start to realize that in our universe, in our solar system, because of gravity and the interplay of all these different planets and so forth, you would actually, there's no way that you could just create a clock like we have in the sky from this other model. That other model wouldn't be stable. We have something that's stable. There's an interrelationship. It's much more complex than the simple idea of, well, 30 days to the month and 360 days to the year. Plus we see and we haven't talked about the the sidereal month. We only talk about the synodic month, the one we observe. But the sidereal month, the revolution of the moon in relationship to the stars, is 27.3 days. And we get that 273, and this number shows up again and again. So why has God done this? I guess that's one of the questions that I have. Why has he done this? Why has he directed Ezekiel? Why has he directed us to this chronology? Is this purposeful on God's part? Or is this something of human imagination? And if God's purpose, why is he doing this? I know it's a big question to ask why God's doing something.
It's not just big, it's huge.
Okay.
I mean, in this kind of a situation, what is he trying to tell us?
Mm-hmm.
What example is he giving us at this point that is relevant for us today?
Well, and that's the question, because it brings us back to Ezekiel. So one is, this movement was brought to Ezekiel and Josiah Litch without any intention of doing any of this. Nobody was thinking about, we're going to be making a prediction with Ezekiel and Josiah Litch about a certain date. We just didn't know that. But we found all these things, so many other things in the story of Joseph and story of Ezra. And then those all came together to make this prediction. But now we're seeing that this is not something that's, just happenstance. I mean, for me personally, obviously I'm more involved in it than most people are, but I look at this 25920 years of the great year, and I think all of these numbers have come together. And now God is showing us that there's a big picture. Now, I don't know what that means as far as we're not expecting, the earth to be around. Jesus is going to come along before that. But God gave us this pattern or this design that was recognized by the ancients and is used in Bible prophecy. These numbers are used. There doesn't appear on the surface to be a relationship between these numbers, but there is. And I've only kind of touched on it a bit. That's part of the problem I'm having here, because I could go on for days. We could just start looking at these numbers, looking at these dates, looking at these spans of time, looking at how these relate to the 70 weeks, how these relate to the 2,300 days, how they relate to the 20 prophetic mirror, how all these things are interlocked, and that this number continues to show up again and again. A lot of these numbers do, but they're all interlocked with each other. That is, they're all interdependent. And for me, the idea that the year and the month are connected in these cycles with the great year, and that they produce these types of numbers that are prophetic numbers, to me is extremely profound. And I don't know really how to put it together. So, I mean, I did the one paper on the Molad interval. And, and I'm trying to write this other one, and it's like just too much information. Like, I don't really know how to organize it, as you can tell by this presentation. Like, where do I start? Where do I begin? And how do I lead somebody through it so that they can see it? That they can see the Bible prophecy is designed from the beginning. That is, God didn't just create the world. He saw the end from the beginning. He saw you and I and all these dates and all these numbers, and he created a universe where they would become significant to the final generation. I think that's huge. And I know for me personally, again, this shows that God is in control, that we don't need to worry about the things that are coming on the world.
Amen.
Because he's shown us, he's seen all this before, and he's been showing us the things we need to see when we need to see them, and not before. And so the fact that he's showing us all these things now means that we're coming to the end. And this movement has seen things that nobody has ever seen. And to sort of abandon this movement or criticize the movement, or say somehow that we were not led by God, would not be wise, because it's pretty clear that we have been. Now, somebody could argue that this is just, Theodore, using his magic or something and playing with numbers. But I don't see how this could be. First off, I don't have that ability. And second, we can see that this is not just something that's a few dates here and there. This is everything. Everything is tied together. And no man could create this type of design, because it's not under our control. I can't control how long the precession of the equinoxes is. Any questions? I know it's not an easy study. I guess I have a question. The question is, should I pursue writing a paper on this in detail? Is that a useful use of my time?
And not you not take your time and you let God to use you to make you both the story and wrote the notes.
Okay.
Now it is his time, not your time, to
Okay.
write it down.
Okay, thanks, Mark. It's God's time and he's telling me to use it.
Yes,
Okay.
I would take the time and try to organize your thoughts just a little bit more,
Mhm.
and then let's revisit this.
Yeah, because I'm gonna have to start writing it. I mean, so the reason I wanted to present it is I wanted to try to get it so that I could figure out how to present it in a paper. But it's really big.
No, it's huge, and what you've got here, there is some validity to this. It's just that it's very hard to track your thought,
Right, because they're numbers.
not just because they're numbers.
Okay.
It's you were having difficulty explaining this.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt I'm having difficulty because, well, I don't know how to, because it's connected to so many things,
Right?
right? So there's all these connections and they're all interlocked with each other. You know, the 215, the 216, the 217, these are all parts of these prophetic periods.
But if you were to take just that, the
Yeah.
215, 216, 217, and focus on that part of it, you may find it easier to build your paper from there.
Okay.
Well, there may be some other things that come to your mind as you're working on this that you can add to the paper. You may not be ready to publish it for a while.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the thing is, we look at this 25920. I mean, we can divide it by 12, but we can divide it by 120. And 120, of course, is the prophecy of Noah, right? And of course, I could relate the 120 to times 49 to this period of 5,880 years from when I believe that sin entered. And then we had 120 years left after 1844, and God has extended that time. That's just the theory I have. I can't prove that because we don't really know when sin occurred, but that fits in with Jewish tradition. But yeah, I need to somehow figure out how to. The calculator can help if it's accurate, right? That is, I haven't designed it to work with everything yet. I have to find a simpler way to make that calculator for the Molad interval be more visual. But anyway, I thank everyone for helping me with this study. I know it's probably a bit frustrating since I'm not extremely clear on it. Any final thoughts?
I've given you my thoughts.
Okay, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this study and for the people that are willing to look into these things, even though they're not extremely well formed. And I pray that you can help me to study this out and help others to bring pieces of the puzzle together. Please be with each one. May your angels watch over us today. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.